Welcome to another edition of All in Politics. Good evening. I'm Rob Cooper at Rob Cooper Jr. on Instagram, and filling in for us for Walt, the damager today. Walt has some other priorities today, and sends his regards out to the All in Politics audience, and he'll definitely be back in the same seat, same time, same place next week. But trying to fill Walt's large shoes is my son Eli Cooper at Eli Coop on Twitter or all the other social media platforms. What's going on, Laj?
Not much. Got big shoes to fill today, but I'm up for it. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, good. A couple of things that we wanted to chat about today, especially from the political arena. Last week we took a week off just with all the things that were happening with Donald Trump having some issues with COVID-19 being airlifted to Walter Reed Hospital.
Yeah.
There was a lot of energy going on in the universe, and quite frankly, I didn't think that I had anything positive to add into the universe. So I said sometimes when you don't have anything nice to say, it's always best to be silent about it, as I've always taught you. But we had a action-packed weekend. Last week we had the VP debates. I thought that was real interesting. It was well anticipated. This is something that I think people marked their calendars for October to see these VP debates as soon as Kamala Harris was named the VP choice of Joe Biden. Everyone was looking forward to this debate just because they've had an opportunity to see her in action on the Senate floor and doing a lot of her being a former prosecutor and attorney general in California. A lot of people were excited to see how she will come across on the debate floor. So before I get my thoughts, what was your thoughts about Kamala Harris and her performance, and also Vice President Mike Pence?
Well, overall, I thought the debate in general was much better than the presidential one. Obviously, these two are a little more level-headed than Joe and obviously Trump is. Or really, I should say Trump, because Joe is not afraid to get, not I shouldn't say stoop down to his level, but really go back and forth with Trump. He's willing to stand up to him and go toe to toe with him. And I think what we saw in the presidential debate was more of a debate of personalities more than policies. And I think what we saw in this one was more of a debate of policies rather than personalities. And the thing that really stood out to me in this one was I felt that Kamala was less on the offensive to like Pence and their stances, and really talked more about her platform and what her and Joe are running on. Where she did have moments where she went at Pence and the Trump administration, but I think we saw less of prosecutor Kamala Harris and more of potential VP Kamala Harris in that regard.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. One of the things I was, I caught that as well, and I know one of the things that I was interested in watching to see, if Kamala could kind of make that transition, right? We've known her as the good and bad, we've known her as the they call her Coplama or whatever they call her, really taking shots at her as a prosecutor, as the San Francisco district attorney. Also, it was brought up by Mike Pence about her record as the California attorney general. But people forget, I mean, in between all that, man, she still is a United States senator. So she's gone from enforcing the law to now being someone who creates the laws or is part of the lawmaking process. So there's, I think there's a distinct difference in that in the jobs of a political figure. And in my opinion, I think she's got some unfair press and some unfair energy from many of the electorate out there who really try to use her past job against her. But I saw that you wrote an article just came out today on allinnetwork.net. Why don't you talk a little bit about that to speak on on Kamala's record as a prosecutor?
Yeah, so much has been made about this. It's been the biggest talking point of her presidential campaign and now her vice presidential campaign. And yeah, today, released on the website at allinnetwork.net, I broke down some of the main criticisms behind her record as a prosecutor, which is mostly her marijuana convictions and a few other things. But the big thing that people love to point out, and a lot amongst Black people, that Black people love to point out is that there's this number that goes around. You've probably seen it on social media of 1,500 marijuana convictions during her time as Attorney General of California. And there's not a lot of fact checking. Well, not anymore because it has been fact checked already. But there's not a lot of people who pay attention to fact checkers. They see memes and things like that on social media, and this false perception that Kamala Harris was this tyrant against marijuana is now being spread because they heard that number from Tulsi Gabbard in the primaries, and now people have run away with it. The fact of the matter behind that is, one, the number is incorrect. It was 1,883 people who were sent to state prison during Kamala Harris's time as Attorney General for marijuana convictions. But here's why that number is misleading. It's misleading because Kamala Harris, as the Attorney General, doesn't prosecute these crimes. It's actually lower level state attorneys who prosecute these crimes, and I touch on that in the article. And granted, it is technically her department or administration, I guess, if you want to call it that. That's prosecuting these crimes, but it's not actually her individually that was prosecuting these people during that time. So that number is incredibly misleading because most, if not all, of those convictions were not prosecuted by Kamala Harris. But more so her department. Also, I think we're looking at this the wrong way. When it comes to a prosecutor's job, if you don't know much about the courtroom, essentially the prosecutor's job is to present a case as to why someone who was arrested and indicted on charges should be convicted. And it's the defense attorney's job to present a case as to why they shouldn't. And then the decision that actually determines whether you go to jail or not is by judges and juries, depending on the type of trial that you're in. So even though Kamala Harris may have prosecuted and been a part in imprisoning Black people for marijuana, ultimately the decision is not in her hands whether or not you go to prison. And really, her job is just to present the case as to why. And also, her job is to prosecute the law. So if the law criminalizes marijuana, she legally has to prosecute you for it.
Right. That's right.
So it's really not her fault. At that point, she's a cog in the system that created the war on drugs, the failed war on drugs. But it's not her fault for prosecuting these people, in my opinion. And if you actually look at the numbers throughout that 1,800 over 5 years, they dropped significantly during her time. Another thing that I addressed here in the article, in her first year, 817 admissions were made, or admissions to state prisons for the amount of marijuana, or for marijuana convictions, I should say, were in her first year, compared to 137 in her last. So her department was incredibly more lenient in her throughout her 5 years. The number significantly dropped every year to the point where only 137 people were convicted of marijuana crimes during her last year as the Attorney General of California. And I think what that shows is she was the most liberal prosecutor
Right.
California
Right.
ever had. She
Right.
locked up the least amount of black people for marijuana crimes compared to her predecessors. But ultimately, at that time, she was not the one who criminalized marijuana. Now, in 2016, she becomes the senator of California, and marijuana becomes decriminalized.
Right.
So
Right. That's
I
right.
think what we're not giving her enough credit for is, although she was a cog in the system, she was not she can't be held solely responsible for these convictions and the criminalization of marijuana. That criticism needs to go directly to state
State
and local
legislator and
state
the governor.
legislators, right,
That's right.
and federal legislators. Those are the people that need to be held accountable. And if you ask me and you look at her voting record as a senator, clearly, as the attorney general, she saw this as an issue.
That's right. That's
And
right.
the way that she voted in the Senate was to fix this issue.
That's right.
Um, and it all traces back to some of the comments that Mike Pence made here in this
That's right.
VP debate. He
That's right.
contradicts himself 3 times.
That's
The
right.
first thing he does is he says he criticizes her for a vote that she made in the Senate and said that people called her the most liberal senator ever,
Which is
even more
true.
than Bernie Sanders.
Which is
Which,
true. That's
yeah,
the only true statement that he made.
was one of the few that he did make.
Right.
But later on in the debate, he then attacks her record as a prosecutor, saying that 19% of African Americans were more likely to be convicted of crimes during her reign as the attorney general. Well, one, that number is there's no numbers that support what he said. And again, I touch on this in the article. It's actually a completely different. That number that he's quoting is actually coming from a completely set of information. So it's actually not accurate. The statement that he makes during the debate, but the
Right.
fact that he uses racial bias to attack Kamala Harris, but while earlier in this debate calling her the most liberal senator is a contradiction in itself. And then later on in this debate, he, after attacking her prosecution record, he says that systemic racism and complicit bias doesn't exist.
Doesn't
Well,
exist.
if you're criticizing her for prosecuting African Americans at a higher rate than whites and Hispanics, then you're also at that point in time acknowledging that systemic racism exists.
That's right.
So you can't have it both ways. You can't deny that that exists later on in the debate after attacking her record, and which essentially acknowledges that. So he actually contradicts himself, and this is actually a big problem that there is about her record as a prosecutor. The right believes that she was not tough enough
That's right.
on crime during her time as a prosecutor and as a senator, and the left thinks that she was too tough.
That's
So
right.
she's kind of getting heat from both sides on her record as a prosecutor, but from different ways. And it's because people don't actually understand her role as a prosecutor and the actual details of her record. And I kind of wish she defended herself a little bit better in the debate, or
Mhm.
defended her record in the debate. Obviously, you only get 2 minutes, and I've
Right.
spent 5 to 7 here
Right.
explaining why that's misleading. So she can't really.
And you went
Um,
uninterrupted as well, mind you.
Oh yeah, exactly. I didn't have
Like
an entitled white guy interrupting me. So
right.
it's a little more difficult to do that on stage during a vice presidential debate. So especially from Black people, I think this is something that Black people who aren't actually educated on the actual topics at hand, in this debate, they see that number and they're like, oh, well, Kamala Harris is not for us. Well, that's not true. She wants to decriminalize marijuana nationwide, which would be an incredible step forward in reducing mass incarceration of Black people. She also, and her voting record matches that. The
Right.
state she's
Right.
in decriminalized it.
Right.
So these are things that actually would tremendously help Black people. But they don't understand that's actually a part of the platform that she's running on, because no one puts that in a meme on
Right.
social media.
That's right.
So if
And
you're not paying attention, you don't know that.
And it's interesting too. It really puts the conservative in Donald Trump's campaign kind of in a rock between a rock and a hard place, because he's trying to run on this law and order type of platform.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, and I know Joe Biden actually brought that out, that actually violent crime actually has gone up since the Obama years, since Obama and Biden have left office under Donald Trump. That's
Yep.
number one. And then number two, when you're talking about, then you're on the other hand, you're in the debate criticizing her for enforcing the laws that were actually on the books. So it's kind of
Right.
like, you're in that rock and a hard place. Where's your campaign messaging? And that's why I thought, just from a political strategy standpoint, I thought that Kamala really added a ton to Biden's ticket, because
Yep.
it really did, drive a dent into the Trump administration, the Trump campaign's messaging that they were trying to get across to the American people and try to win votes. And we'll talk about how they're doing in just a second. But this podcast is brought to you by the All In Network. Don't forget to head over to All In Network to finish up reading on this article that Elijah wrote on setting Kamala Harris's record straight, and also to find all of our podcasts, including the All In podcast, which is our sports oriented podcast with Elijah and Mike. We also have Rain and Bliss, which is our these young ladies are doing a phenomenal job of bringing the pop culture to our airwaves. Real Deal Radio, All In Politics, and the Beast Gaming podcast, which is a podcast for all of you gamers out there. So head over to allinnetwork.net to hear all those podcasts. And also you can view those podcasts, as you can view this one, on YouTube. And I know my man Walt, the damage is not here, but if he was here, he will tell you to smash that subscribe button and like button, so you make sure that you get all of our updates and notifications. So talking a little bit about the election right now, Donald Trump right now, according to 538.com, is currently has a 14% chance to be reelected. Joe Biden has a 85% chance to be elected. And then if you while you're on that site, I think 538 is a outstanding site for all of your analytics needs. Of course, they're not a sponsor on this, so I'm not going to pump them up too much, but I will say that they're a real credible website. When you look at the popular vote right now, they have Joe Biden leading on a national scale, 53.4%, and Donald Trump having 45.3%. Percent of the vote, and that's on this day, October the 10th. And go to that. I highly recommend that you go to that website and take a look at, keep track of the race and where it's at today. And just so everyone knows, what that is an average of many polls that come out. So you may see a CNN poll, the Wall Street Journal may have their poll. So CNN may have Joe Biden up by 14. Wall Street Journal may have Joe Biden up by 10. So what they do is they'll take an average of that and maybe say Joe Biden's up by 12. So go to 538.com and you can get all the polls and get it kind of like an average. And what that really does is just give you the temperature. Now, a lot of folks will come out, Elijah, and say, well, the polls this time 4 years ago had Hillary Clinton winning, had an 85% chance or maybe even 90% chance of being elected president. What's the difference now? Why should we believe the polls now? And what I will say is, I think we're in a different world than we were in 2016. I think, as you mentioned, a lot of misleading information was out there. We didn't know how to kind of read or decipher the memes that were or the whereabouts where those memes were coming from, misinformation that was coming. We didn't find out until it was too late that we generally fell, I'll use a street term here, we fell for the okey doke. So, we believe, the Hillary's emails and the other nonsense. It's funny because you see Donald Trump even trying to resurrect and dust off his, 2016 playbook in hopes that he
Right.
can maybe, cut some of these points and get back into the race. But here's what the difference is. The big difference right now is really the mail-in and the early voting data. I just saw a piece, I think, in the beginning of the week, where it said about 4.7 million people, I think it was on MSNBC, have already voted. Well, that number today, Elijah, is now 9 million. 9 million people have voted, and roughly around, out of those folks that have voted, roughly it's about 60% of them is around Democrats. About 30 something percent are kind of like or Republicans, and then the others are independents. So talk to me. Where do you see this election going, and how do you feel about these numbers?
Well, the reason I think we can trust the numbers a little bit more, in this go around is because of that reason that you mentioned. There's actual voter data, and a large portion of it that these polls can actually go off of. So not only do we have polls which are supposed to be representative of how the voters are going to act, we also have 9 million votes already recorded that tell us how they actually voted. You're assuming that those Democratic voters have already cast their vote for Joe Biden. This has not been the typical campaign where Democrats are voting for Trump. It's actually quite been the opposite. We're seeing a lot of Republican endorsements for Joe Biden and his campaign. And now we're seeing that Democratic voters are getting out to the polls early on, with 9 million votes being casted. And I think the Trump COVID diagnosis is, and not just him, his wife, and a lot of people who are at that super spreader party that they're calling it, coming down with these cases. And I think if there was people who were on the fence about who they were going to vote for, I think that did them in, or did the Trump administration in, because the COVID situation is the biggest talking point in this election.
That's right.
Maybe besides equal rights. You know, and to see him and pretty much everyone who was there who has been downplaying the severity of this and things like that, to watch him not only contract the virus, then be airlifted to Walter Reed Hospital and get $100,000 worth of medical treatment and be released in a few days. The average American person has not had that luxury. And mind you, that $100,000 was not 1 cent of that was paid for Donald Trump.
That's right.
So socialized medicine is bad for everyone else, not bad for Donald Trump. And I think a lot of these hypocrisies, are being shown here. Is that, okay, well, you told us it was safe to not have to wear a mask, or if we were outside, we were safe. And it turns out that's not true, not even for you, who's in supposedly the most protected bubble that there is at the White House.
Right.
You got COVID before the NBA, before anyone in the NBA bubble got it. And that is, just that, to me, that's it's a very bad look for the Trump administration, because essentially what the NBA has shown us is how you stop the spread. And Trump and his administration has showed us exactly how you contract it. And I think that killed him so close to election day.
Right.
And we're seeing people turn out and vote knowing that they have to get this guy out of office for public health and safety.
And the fact that not just is so close to election day, people are actually voting. 9 million people have voted. I just saw some stats on that. Now, only 9 states have been transparent with their updated data. California, Florida, Iowa, Maryland, North Carolina, New Jersey, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and South Dakota. Now, out of those 9 states, I believe it's 4 of those states are actually swing states. So you have Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Iowa are actually why Iowa is a swing state is beyond me. That was always a kind of go-to red state. So that I find that real interesting how Trump allowed that to slip into a swing state. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, as someone who doesn't support Donald Trump, I'll take it.
Yeah.
But anyway, but looking at that on those ballots, you see it's been reported that in just in those states, the Democrats have returned over 2 million of those ballots. The Republicans have reported returning close to about 900,000, about 891,000 to be exact. Then a third party reported 27,000, and then independents or no party affiliation reported returning their ballots at a rate of 716,000, which I find interesting. So it was a total of about 3.6 million ballots returned. And of course, my special ed math that I wrote out on this little envelope, if I gave Donald Trump all of the third parties and all of the non-affiliates, it just based off of those 9 states, Joe Biden has a percentage of about 55% of the vote share. Donald Trump would have 44. And again, that's basically saying that all of the third parties and all of the non-party affiliates voted for Donald Trump, along
Right.
with the Republicans. He still is topping and maxing out at 44%.
Yeah.
So the Biden administration, the Biden campaign should be feeling really good about themselves. But the Trump administration may be there may be some nerves there. I'm not one to, go into rumors and things like that. But what I would say, if I was running the Donald Trump campaign, I'll be looking for an out right now, whether through a resignation or something. And if I'm Congress, just because of the behaviors and some of the things that you just mentioned about the COVID in particular, which saying how dangerous this man is holding maskless rallies and doing the joyride. It's clearly that this guy is not really fit to lead. And if I was Congress, I would take a serious look at the 25th Amendment, in particular, Section 4 of that amendment. Let's talk a little bit about that. And that really, you know, talks about, particularly on Section 4, really talks about the transition of power when the president is pretty much incapable of serving in his position. What are your thoughts about this? We've heard rumblings about this, on Twitter and all some in the media, but it really wasn't taken serious consideration. Was really not taken for this. But to see Nancy Pelosi, standing out, in public, with the 25th Amendment, it looks like the lawmakers and policymakers are really taking a serious look at this.
Yeah, and it's actually something that was brought up, not the 25th Amendment per se, but the transition of power was brought up in the vice presidential debate. The moderator asked how each candidate would handle it, and
Right.
neither of them actually answered it.
Right.
And to be honest, I think neither of them answered it because they truly didn't know. We'd be in unprecedented territory if that were the case. And I think that's why we're now seeing talks about the 25th Amendment and what can be done if there is a threat to a peaceful transition of power. So and obviously, Pelosi is now starting to bring this up because Trump has not come out and said that he will, cede to the results of the election
Right.
unless
Right.
he
Right.
wins,
Right.
which, to me really doesn't make any sense. I know trying to throw logic behind anything Donald Trump says is hard, but how can the election not be rigged just because you won, but it's rigged when you lose? And that really doesn't make any sense to me. But when it comes to this 25th Amendment, essentially what would happen is they would grant acting president powers to the vice president, which would be Mike
Right.
Pence.
Right.
And actually, I think this, becomes a little bit dangerous because Mike Pence has closely aligned himself with Trump.
Right.
And with his failure to answer that question in the vice presidential debate, I'm not 100% sure that having him act as have him as acting president to, then make a peaceful transition of power, is a safe thing for the American people either.
Right. Right.
I think he's a little more level headed than Trump is. So, maybe it's okay, but his not answering that question is concerning to me.
Right.
Now that we know that this is an actual possibility with these polls that are coming out and the numbers from the early voting and things like that, there's a legitimate fear that Donald Trump won't, that Donald Trump will not peacefully leave the office.
Right. Right.
And really, people in his, not only just his administration, but the Republican Party in general, has aligned themselves so close with him
Right.
that it concerns me that any of them have the, courage or integrity to actually uphold whatever results come out of this election. So I understand why Pelosi's talking about it, because we actually need to prepare for it.
Right. And because Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, she's actually third in succession. So
Yeah.
so it'd be interesting of how that is being executed. But yeah, and like you said, Mike Pence, just pretty much proved to the world um on Wednesday that he is not capable or qualified to be president in his own right, because
Yeah.
again he chose to kind of fall on the sword that night for Donald Trump
Hmm.
and really condoned all of the crimes that came out of there. So it's going to
Yeah.
be interesting. I think it's going to be a real interesting and a bumpy ride for the next 20 days, 20 some odd days. But one of the things that we can say, and one of the reasons why you're starting to see movement in a positive direction, is because of you, the voters. Because you are running to the polls, to your early voting sites, you're running to the mailboxes, you're running to your election offices and filling out your ballots. And because this is nationwide, each of the states have their own rules. But we can tell you this: you can go to vote.org to get information on your voting request. Some states have voter registration still open, some have closed. So the best thing to do is go to voting.org to find out the status of your state's laws. The other thing too is, most of these states are, and I know Pennsylvania for sure is offering vote by mail or early voting. Make sure that you go and request a ballot. I can't stress to you more to follow the instructions, particularly those in Pennsylvania. I'll speak to that because that's what I know. But in Pennsylvania, you request a ballot. Once you get that mail-in ballot, read the instructions, fill out, make your selections. When you make your selections, they give you two envelopes. They give you a secrecy ballot and also a mailing envelope. You want to put your ballot into the secrecy envelope, place it in there, and then place it into the mailing the mailing envelope. But also, just don't stick it in the mailbox. There's still some more work you have to do. You have to sign the outside. They give you an area section where you need to sign the application. So make sure all of your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, because believe me, because the way this election is going, they will throw your ballot out and your vote will not be cast. So, and you only get one shot at this. There's no
Yep.
do-overs. There's no eraser or anything like that you can do. So make sure that you have a voting plan. But a great show, Elijah. I appreciate you filling in for Walt the Damager. Walt, will be back with us next week. But again, some exciting times, and of course, we're going to have another exciting show for you. But Elijah, before we go, you want to just tell us about your shows that you have coming up, and tell how folks can get connected with you.
Yep. So for those of you who pay attention to the All In Network, our All In podcast just released a new episode. Yesterday we had a live show So you can watch the replay of that on our YouTube channel at All In. Just search All In Network. You can find our YouTube channel there and catch the replay. If you're listening in on audio, if that's how you consume your podcast, we're on every platform stream of podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. You can follow us on social media: Facebook, we're All In Network; Instagram, All In Network; on Twitter at all_in_pod to get updates on our shows. You can also visit our website where you can find our audio podcast links. You can find our YouTube channel. You can find our merchandise for the All In Network, and also the Rain and Bliss store is available there. And you can also see all of the articles written, not only just mine from today, not our blog writer, Mike Burton Moran, from the Not That You Asked But blog, has a new article that's out now as well. You can find all that on allinnetwork.net. And if you become a member of the site, you can leave comments on these articles. If you become a member, you can get email updates about every piece of content, whether it's a podcast or an article that we release. You get an email notification about it, so you know, and you're in the loop on when new All In Network content drops.
Great. So make sure you get out there to allinnetwork.net. And again, you can get at me at Rob Cooper Jr. on Instagram, not Twitter. So this is another edition of All In Politics. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rob Cooper at Rob Cooper Jr. on Instagram. And that's Elijah Cooper filling in for Walter Damager. Peace.